gals, it's CJ here, your Vegas insider, and it is a beautiful Wednesday, November 6th, 2019. It's a beautiful day in the Mojave Desert today. It's 75 degrees, the sun is shining, and college basketball has started. That is right, we had our first full night of the college basketball season last night. We had the Champions Classic. The top four teams in the country all played last night, as well as over half the top 25 played last night. Unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to finish my college basketball preview series. If you go back and watch some of my prior videos, I did some really in-depth previews on about 8 or 9 of my top 25 college basketball teams. The problem is I wasn't able to finish the series. My channel is brand new. It's only a few weeks old, and I was really busy last week playing a lot of poker. I was hitting the cash games at South Point because they had a big rodeo event last week, so it brought in a ton of tourists, a ton of a lot of outside money and some good games, and that kept me really busy. And then also I make college football videos throughout the season as well, and we are well into the college football season. It's actually about 3/4 of the way over, so it's very important for me to make those college football videos because I love betting the futures and getting the info out as far as possibly making some money doing this. So college football has about another month or so left, and once college football's done, I will be 100% invested into making college basketball videos. They're the only two sports I follow. So once college football's done, I'll be making 100% college basketball videos throughout the season, and they will be very in-depth and detailed. Today what I want to do, I just want to finish my top 25 countdown. It's going to be really quick. I'm just going to give you my 16 through 1, where I had my rankings before yesterday. I'm not taking yesterday's games into account. So what you're going to see here is what I had written down about a month ago before I'd even started my channel. I will make a college basketball video next week after this weekend's games, and I will re-rank everybody based on what I've seen this week. So let's go ahead and get right into it. Again, if you haven't seen number 25 through number 17, go back and look at those because those videos are very detailed. I have Vermont at 25 all the way through Utah State at 17, and you'll get a very good in-depth preview of those teams. But I'm just going to go ahead and rattle these off, and we'll talk a little bit about them. I don't want to go too long with this video. It's going to be long as it is since we have 16 teams here. But 16 through 10, or 16 through 11, I have Ohio State at 16. I had Villanova at 15, and this is how you could tell. I have not adjusted these rankings based on yesterday, because I'm going to tell you right now, I have Villanova way too low. I was putting my Villanova ranking more based on what I saw last year than what Villanova's been the past 3 or 4 years. Villanova's won 2 of the last 4 natties in college basketball. It's just crazy what Jay Wright has done with this team. He has built them into a full-fledged blue blood powerhouse. The thing is, last year was definitely a big step back. 2 years before that, they had won the Natty. 3 years before that, they had won the Natty. The year before last year, they won the Natty. And then last year was just different. They lost a lot of their key pieces with Mikal Bridges, Jalen Brunson, Omari Spellman. They had all left. And then last year, they were so heavy on, Eric Paschal and Phil Booth. They relied on those two guys so much that they were a good team, but they weren't not a great team by any means, in my opinion, last year. I wasn't very high on them last year and turned out to be right, although they did still win the Big East. It was still, even an average Villanova team was still good enough to win the Big East, so you have to say something about where their program's at and how good of a coach Jay Wright is. But so I had him coming in at 15 this year, and I can tell you right now that's way too low. I will adjust them in next week's rankings. I can see Villanova is back. They're more the Villanova team of 2 and 3 and 4 years ago than the Villanova team of last year. And I know they only played Army yesterday, but it's just the way they move the ball. It's the way they looked. It's how comfortable they looked offensively. This is going to be a beast of a Villanova team. So I will definitely have them higher next week. But I'm giving you my honest preseason top 25 because I wanted to finish it, even though the season started. I had Nova at 15. I had Oregon at 14. And the reason I had Oregon this high was because they reclassified in Fali Dante, a 5-star recruit. He was supposed to be in next year's recruiting class. They reclassified him. They reclassified Addison Patterson as well, a 4-star guard. And then they went out and got Shakur Houston. They got Anthony Mathis from New Mexico off the transfer market. So, you know, a few months ago, I wouldn't have had Oregon anywhere near any top 25 ranking. But Dana Altman just did an amazing job of overhauling and retooling this roster. And so I have Oregon this high, but now I'm concerned about N'Faly Dante. The NCAA ruled him ineligible academically to start the season. It looks like he won't be able to play until either the end of December, beginning of January. And I'm just wondering if Dante's going to go the Bol route and just not play and get drafted next year, or maybe go the R.J. Hampton route, who was a top 10 recruit this year who decided to just skip college altogether and play a year in, I believe it was New Zealand or Australia, and make some money and then get drafted into the NBA next year. Or LaMelo Ball. LaMelo Ball's playing in Australia, making money, and he may be the number 1 pick in the draft next year in the NBA. So I think guys like N'Faly Dante, who the NCAA kind of gives it to him hard and says, well, you're ineligible for this period of time, he may just say, okay, screw it, I'm not playing college ball at all. And I have no insight as to whether he's going to do that or not. But just to be clear, I had Oregon here at 14 because I was assuming Dante was going to be on the roster. If he does not play and you take him off the roster, they might drop to like 20 or so. I still like Oregon. I still like Peyton Pritchard. He had an awesome game yesterday against Fresno State in their opener. The backcourt's great. I like Mathis as the 2 guard. They were high school teammates together in Oregon, and then Mathis went to play for New Mexico, and now he's a grad transfer back in the backcourt with Peyton Pritchard. I like Shakur Houston. I like C.J. Walker. He's a 5-star recruit playing a power forward spot, although he did not score in the game yesterday, which is a little concerning. He came off the bench and only played, I think, 11 or 12 minutes and got a donut in the scoring column, so that's a little concerning. But he's still a good player, and he's still got a lot of potential. He's got that 5-star potential. I think he'll be all right. So I will leave Oregon ranked, but without Dante, I'm not sure if they're this high. At 13, I have Gonzaga. And yes, if you've noticed, I haven't talked about St. Mary's yet. So I'm very high on St. Mary's. I basically have St. Mary's and Gonzaga as a pick'em to win the West Coast Conference. I just think that Gonzaga lost so much off of last year's team. And I know I didn't have a YouTube channel last year, but just so you know, I thought Gonzaga was the best team in the country last year. I know they didn't even make the Final Four. They got upset by Texas Tech. They did make the Elite Eight. But just watching these games day in and day out and breaking Gonzaga down on film, I thought they were the best team. And I was scared to death that they were going to win the championship because I had no futures on them. I had 80-1 futures on Texas Tech, so it was a great day for me when Texas Tech upset them. But I was scared to death going into that game because I thought Gonzaga was going to win the whole thing last year. And they lose 2 NBA players in Rui Hachimura and Brandon Clark. Both went to the league this year. They lost their point guard, Josh Perkins, who, you know, he did a lot for them over his 4 years playing for Gonzaga. They also lost the other 2 guards, Zach Norvell. He left after last year. So they have to replace so much production from last year. And Mark Few's such a great coach, and they have enough talent to obviously still be relevant. But I just think that if Randy Bennett and St. Mary's is ever going to get Gonzaga and actually win the West Coast Conference regular season title, I know they won the WCC tournament last year, but they were nowhere near as good as Gonzaga was last year. If they're actually going to be as good or better than Gonzaga on a full year basis, it's going to be this year because St. Mary's has all their key pieces coming back, and Gonzaga loses so much that, again, as I was saying, I had those two as a coin flip, but I gave the tiebreaker to St. Mary's. I put St. Mary's 12th, Gonzaga 13th. I just love Jordan Ford. And now we'll shift gears to St. Mary's at 12. If you have not seen Jordan Ford play and you're a college basketball fan, you need to go on the St. Mary's homepage on ESPN or Fox Sports or CBS Sportsline, wherever. Look at their schedule and find their televised games this season and watch Jordan Ford play. The guy is incredible. He is the best player in the country that the casual fan knows nothing about. I'm telling you right now, this guy is awesome, and he's great to watch. St. Mary's played Wisconsin yesterday. They won a very close game. They beat Wisconsin by 2 in overtime, and Jordan Ford had about half the team's points in the game. He's phenomenal, and I think he has a shot to be an All-American this year. That's how good he is. And he's crazy deadly with the ball. He's so creative with the ball in his hands. And he's just a slippery assassin at the combo guard position. I just love watching the dude play. So I'm very high on St. Mary's this year. I think this is the year they actually show up and beat Gonzaga. I'm going to say they play Gonzaga 3 times. I'm going to say they beat them twice. They'll play the 2 regular season games, and then I'll say they meet again in the West Coast conference tournament. I'm going to say St. Mary's gets 2 of those 3. So I have them 12. I have Gonzaga 13. Number 11, I have UVA. UVA's taken a big step back. There's no way around that. With what they lost, like Gonzaga, they lost so much production off the team. And as great as Tony Bennett is, and as great as the system is there in Charlottesville, UVA is not Duke, and they're not Kentucky, or even Kansas for that matter, when it comes to recruiting. They don't just reload year in and year out. They don't get high 5-star level talent. They do get some solid 4-star level talent, and they develop those players. The players, stay at least 2 or 3 years, sometimes 4, and they get a lot better throughout their time learning from Tony Bennett. But they don't get the 5-star freshmen who are going to come in and make an impact and take over games and take you back to a Final Four. The reason I do have them 11, though, it's UVA, and they're going to be an elite defensive team. There's no doubt about it. And I think guys like Jay Huff and Mamadi Diakite will take big leaps this year. So that will kind of fill the void that they're losing from Kyle Guy, Ty Jerome, DeAndre Hunter. It's not going to be enough to make them anywhere near as good or as dangerous as they were last year, but they're still going to be a solid team. They're still going to disrupt what you do on offense with their defense. They're still going to be a witch to play against night in and night out, and they're still going to be a very good team and a dangerous team in the tournament. But I think they're going to really struggle to score. And it's going to be hard to know where the offense is going to come from at times this year. I think the X factor is Jay Huff. How much better does Jay Huff get as a 7'1" kind of stretch center? I know it sounds crazy. I think he plays like the center position, but I know they've been working on his game to step out and hit threes. So we'll see if he can do that and stretch the defense. But I think there's going to be some struggles with the offense. Again, the defense is going to be top, probably 3 or 4 in the nation, elite. It's going to keep them in every game. Their style of play is going to keep them in every game. So they're just outside the top 10. Let's go ahead and break down number 10 through 6, how I had it in the preseason before yesterday. I have Memphis here at number 10. I actually had UVA 10 and Memphis 11, but I switched it at the last minute. I just love, this is a predictive channel. This isn't necessarily who I think are the 25 best rosters. It's how I see teams ending up going into March Madness. And Memphis may not be the 10th best team in the country to start the season because they're so young. But I guarantee you they're going to be in this area when come March Madness. when you're playing a team of all freshmen and a couple of sophomores, they are going to get so much better throughout the season than a team like Michigan State, who they're already at their ceiling almost when the season starts, because you have a 4-year starter at point guard, Cassius Winston, who everybody already has as the player of the year to start the season. I mean, how much better can he get? He's a 22-year-old senior who's put in 4 years. Yes, he's a great player, but there's no road for him to travel to get better. I mean, where Michigan State is pretty much where they're going to be. Now, Michigan State has some young players who will get better throughout the season. But my point is, if you have a team full of experienced players who kind of are what they are, then that's what they are. But Memphis has a ton of talent who has never played together before. They're all coming in. So if you're fading Memphis, or if you're one of these people who has Memphis pretty low, you better hope they're bad to start, because they're only going to get better throughout the season. And once this team plays together for 30 games, come February, come March, this could easily be one of the best teams in the country once they've worked everything out and played together. And I actually like Penny as a coach. I thought he got a lot out of the team last year, and I think it benefits them that the AAC is a much improved conference. I think Houston's going to be really good. Check out my video on Houston. I did a video where I had Houston, Washington, and Texas Tech together. I'm very high on Houston with the Quentin Grimes waiver. I'm very high on Cincinnati. I don't have them ranked. I mean, maybe I shouldn't say I'm very high on them, but Cincinnati's going to be a good team. They should be a tournament team this year. So that's 3 good teams out of the AAC. Wichita State should be much improved. And I was high on South Florida, but they took a devastating injury to Alexis Yetna, their 6'8" power forward, who's one of their key players. And that's just a heartbreaker, because I was really intrigued in seeing if South Florida could make the tournament. I thought they were a bubble type team, and I was higher on them than a lot of people, but that is just a devastating injury. But regardless, the AAC is improved, and there's some real class at the top of the AAC, and I expect Memphis to be, a top 10 team. If they're not already, they will be by tournament time. Number 9, I have Seton Hall. I had Seton Hall as my number 1 in the Big East. I had them 6 spots ahead of Nova. I'm definitely going to rethink that when I redo the rankings next week. I'll probably still have Seton Hall ahead of Nova, but man, I think Nova's going to be really good this year. So I'm banking on the fact that Seton Hall, with all of this returning talent and all of this size, this crazy amount of size they have on their roster, that Kevin Willard figures it out. And of course, you have the ultimate bucket getter in Miles Powell doing the heavy lifting in the scoring department for you. So I'm very, very high on Seton Hall. I think they're going to be great this year. It wouldn't shock me if Nova won the Big East and Seton Hall or Xavier, or even if Xavier came in second and Seton Hall came in third. It wouldn't really shock me, because I think Xavier can be great, and I think Nova will be great this year. But I'm going to ride with my pick. I'm going to stick with Seton Hall winning the Big East. When you look at the 7'2" center they got from Florida State, and I'm so bad with names. I know it's Ike Obiagu. I think that's how you pronounce it. I'm so bad with names. But he's going to be a real force at center. And then you got Mamu coming back at power forward. You have a lot of depth at the guard position. You have Miles Powell, who's one of the best players in the country, and definitely on the short list for the Wooden Award. So, and you have another 7'2" center in Romaro Gill. You have so much height, athleticism, and talent on this team, and just older dudes. Like, when I look at Seton Hall, there's something you're going to hear me talk about a lot, talking about college basketball, and it's just another name for the eye test, but I call it the layup line test, or the getting off the bus test. When you look at a team and you look at them get off the bus to go, from the parking lot into the tunnel to get ready for their game, and you're just physically nervous about playing this team, just seeing them. Seton Hall is one of these teams. They're not a bunch of 18-year-old freshmen. They are men. They are big dudes, and they just look like they're going to kick your ass from the time the ball is tipped. So that scores points with me. I have to factor that into my rankings. I get it. Like, obviously, you have to be high in the metrics and whatnot. I know Ken Palm doesn't love Seton Hall, and I do respect that. But just looking at this team, looking at how old they are, looking at how big they are, I think Willard is going to figure it out this year. And you gotta love Miles Powell as your clutch bucket getter. So I'm gonna ride with the Hall at 9 and keep them there. Well, probably keep them there even next week. Number 8, I had North Carolina. There's not too much to say. North Carolina is an elite blue blood. They have maybe the best freshman in the country in Cole Anthony running the point. He's going to have the ball in his hands every single time Carolina takes the ball up the floor. Unless he's sitting on the bench, every possession, the offense is going to run through Cole Anthony. So that's a good thing. Roy Williams is one of the best coaches in the sport. Roy Williams to college basketball would be Nick Saban or Dabo Swinney in college football. The guy just wins all the time. He's fantastic. And Carolina has won how many national titles with Roy? At least 2, maybe 3, right? And I know they won it a couple of years ago, so it hasn't been that long since he's won a natty. So I'm high on Carolina. I think number 8's a good spot for them. Number 7, I had Maryland. You gotta love the talent coming back on this Maryland team. They were one of the most inexperienced teams in the country last year, but everybody on this roster who's playing meaningful minutes played together last year. The only meaningful loss was Bruno Fernando to the NBA. I think Jalen Smith sticks, fills that void that Fernando's gonna leave. And they have some talented bigs coming in. They have some talented freshman bigs coming in. One of the questions will be how fast can Chol Marial get back. He had surgery before the season. He's going to miss some time. He's a former 5-star, 7'2", center 5-star, but he's had some injury issues. If he comes back healthy and they can get him back by conference play, he'll just add that much more depth to Maryland's front court. I'm all about point guards. I've been following this sport for 30 years. I've never seen a team win the national championship without a legit quality point guard, and Maryland's got one of the best in Anthony Cohen. He's a great facilitator. He's got a great motor. He's a 4-year starter, a senior now. I love senior point guards. So just look at the Villanova team from 2 years ago with Jalen Brunson at the point, like an experienced, solid point, and then Mikal Bridges as your combo guard who's handling the ball a lot too. Very similar to last year with Virginia. Kihei Clark was technically the point guard. He may not be an elite level point guard, but Ty Jerome had the ball in his hands so much. He was the real playmaker for Virginia. He was a great combo guard. And then you had Kyle Guy, who was a fantastic shooter on the wing. So when you have those upperclassmen guards handling the ball, that's what wins in March. And I think Cohen is going to be great at the point this year for Maryland. I wouldn't be surprised at all if Maryland wins the Big Ten. I know everybody loves Michigan State, and we're going to get to Michigan State in a second. And I'm not just saying this because Sparty lost to Kentucky in the Champions Classic. I'm really not taking very much stock in that because the opening game, you're going to get so much better throughout the season from your opening game. I'm not low on Michigan State or anything because they lost to Kentucky, as you'll see in a second, where I had Kentucky ranked even before that game. I'm just saying that I think Maryland can run with Michigan State at every position on the floor. Now, is Cohen as good as Cassius Winston? No, but he's pretty close, and he's the second best point guard / floor general in the Big Ten. So Maryland at 7 seems right to me. I'm comfortable having them there. Number 6, here's another team I might be too low on. I have Louisville here at 6. I think Louisville could easily win the ACC. I'm probably too low on them. The way they looked against Miami yesterday, man. They went on the road in a conference game because the ACC, they play 20 games in conference. They play 20 conference games. So they start their season, some of the teams start playing a conference opponent and then go into non-conference. Well, Louisville went on the road, true road game against a Miami team who I don't think is going to be a bad team. I think Miami's going to be a middle-of-the-pack ACC team, which means they're a decent team. And they beat the living hell out of Miami on the road last year. The final score was like a 13 or 14 point margin of victory. But make no mistake about it, the game was nowhere near as close as the score. Louisville absolutely beat Miami down. They were up at one point in the second half by 30. And they were playing without one of their top players, which is just insane. Louisville's really good. I'll probably move Kansas down and Louisville up in my next rankings. Number 5. Let's hit 5 through 1 here. Number 5, I had Duke in the preseason. Of course, Duke got a great win against Kansas yesterday. I'll probably have to move them up a spot next week. The problem with Duke is I'm not convinced that Trey Jones is going to become an elite three-point shooter. And if I was playing Duke, I would just pack it in and make them beat me from beyond the three-point line. That's how I would play Duke. It is possible that Matthew Hurt might beat you from the three-point line. Him and O'Connell look to be their best three-point shooters. But O'Connell's not that athletic or creative with the ball in his hands. Like, to me, Alex O'Connell's just a catch-and-shoot type guard. So he's not that difficult to defend. I think, it's just better if you're playing this team to make them beat you from the outside and don't let like Vernon Carey and Delorier beat you on the inside. Don't let Trey Jones penetrate. Don't let Trey Jones beat you off the dribble and penetration. Make Trey Jones beat you from 3 until he shows he can do it. That's how I would defend Duke. That's why I have them at 5. I'm just not totally sold on their offense. And their offense wasn't that great watching the game against Kansas. So let's talk about the Duke-Kansas game, because I did watch the whole game yesterday. Duke forced it was either 28 or 29 Kansas turnovers, which is absolutely insane to me when Kansas has a elite, top-level, All-American type point guard in Devin Dotson. So give Duke a lot of credit and give Trey Jones a lot of credit on the defensive end. There's no doubt Trey Jones is a top-tier defensive on-ball disruptor. I would have never thought in a million years Kansas would have ever turned the ball over almost 30 times in a game this season, because I love their point guard. So give Duke credit there. The fact that Duke forced that many turnovers, Duke should have won this game by at least 12 to 15 points, if not more. The fact they only won by, I think it was a 2-point margin of victory, well, they gave up a garbage three-pointer at the horn. So let's say they won the game by 5. They probably should have won this game by a lot more. I didn't think Duke's offense looked great. I loved the hustle that Jack White brought. He got a lot of loose balls. He got some offensive rebounds. But he didn't look great shooting the ball. I didn't think O'Connell looked great shooting the ball. I'm a little concerned with Duke's offense. But again, it's only the first game, and they played an elite opponent, so they will get better. I think 5's fine for Duke in this spot, because I actually had Florida at 4 ahead of them in the preseason, and I think I'm going to stay with that. Florida, to me, Duke doesn't have anybody who looks as good as Kerry Blackshear to me. Blackshear looked great. He posted a 20-10 game in Florida's first game against North Florida. Now, I get it, it's only North Florida, but you know what? Kerry Blackshear is one of these guys I was talking about, like Winston. He's an elite all-conference or all-American type player. He's not, you don't know if he's going to get any better because he's already 22 years old, but you know what you're getting from him. He is an elite talent, and he already makes... It's not like the ceiling for Florida is going to get that much higher throughout the year, but the floor is already super high for Florida as long as they have Blackshear. I think Florida is a legit threat to Kentucky at the top of the SEC. I think they're a legit Final Four contender. And then the younger guys will get better. Guys like Scotty Lewis, guys like Trey Mann, Omar Payne especially. Omar Payne is the X factor to me for Florida. Everybody talks about Andrew Nembhard at the point, and he is great. you're going to hear me say it all the time. I love good point guards, and Florida absolutely has one. A 6'5" point guard in Nembhard, great passer, great size, can score when he needs to, but he's a pass first facilitating point guard, which I love, and he's got enough weapons around him with Trey Mann, with Blackshear, with Scotty Lewis, and Noah Locke at the other two guard. I think it's wonderful that he wants to pass first, because he will get the most out of those guys around him. But at 6'5", he can also take it to the hole and get his points when he needs to. So I just love Florida because of that. What I was going to say is Florida does have some young players who will get a lot better throughout the season. Scotty Lewis, Trey Mann, Noah Locke, and I was talking about my X factor is Omar Payne. So if Florida has a deficiency, it's depth in the front court. Yesterday they played 4 small around 1 big, which is kind of what Virginia Tech did when they had Kerry Blackshear there at Virginia Tech. So Florida kind of played the same way. They played 4 6'3" to 6'5" guys around the 6'10" Blackshear. So Florida doesn't have a lot of front court depth. The backup to Blackshear is Omar Payne, who's a top 50 6'10" recruit. A true freshman this season. So his development this year, his ceiling, how good he can be, is really what's going to be the difference between Florida being a Sweet 16 or Elite 8 team to being a Final Four team. And it's not that Omar Payne is going to be the best player on the team. I'm not saying that. But the better quality minutes and the more meaningful minutes he can give them, especially giving a rest to Blackshear, or if Blackshear gets in foul trouble, or sometimes if Mike White wants to go big and run Blackshear and Payne on the floor together, because Payne's more of a center and Blackshear's more of a power forward type. So he has some flexibility with this lineup if he wants to go big and run them in the front court together. Now you have a really big lineup, still with 3 skilled guards around it. I really like all the options and all the weapons Mike White has at his disposal with this team. So Omar Payne is a key. He's not the best player, but he kind of is the X factor. I already know what Blackshear is. He's an All-American level player. I already know how good Nembhard is. I already know how good Noah Locke is. Trey Mann is going to be an outstanding player. Scotty Lewis is going to be a great wing and one of their best defenders. So they need a second option in the front court, and I think Omar Payne can be that guy. And if he ends up being great this year, then Florida can easily win the SEC and be even better than Kentucky. And seeing as where I have Kentucky here in my preseason rankings, that's saying a hell of a lot. So I had Kansas at 3. I'm probably going to move them down based off of the Duke loss. I think next week it's only fair that I move Duke ahead of Kansas, based on the fact they just beat them head to head. It was a surprising result to me, I have to say. This is the final preseason ranking I had Kansas at, but earlier, before I even started the channel, I would say maybe 2 or 3 months ago, I had Kansas number 1. Until all of the crazy FBI stuff and the notice of allegations from the NCAA, where they basically put Kansas on blast saying, look, we know you're a cheater, we know you're a dirty program, and we're going to be watching you all year. That made me lower Kansas from 1 to 3. When I just actually looked at the talent and the combination of raw talent plus experience coming back and elite star power on a roster, I had Kansas number 1 because I think Azubuike's great. He's one of the best centers, maybe the best true center in college basketball. Then you have Dotson, who's an elite level point guard. He was only a true freshman last year, and he was great. So I thought he would make that step up into Cassius Winston type, All-American point guard level play. And it convinced me to have Kansas 1, but when you have the NCAA breathing down your neck and you have this scandal over you like they do, and make no mistake about it, Bill Self got caught cheating. I've been saying for years that Bill Self's a cheater and Kansas is a dirty program. I've been saying that forever, and I personally don't like Kansas. I'm just giving you the straight up skinny on who's good and who's not, and who to bet and who not to bet if you want to win money. So if you give me high enough future odds on Kansas, I would take them. But I don't like Kansas. I think Bill Self's a cheater, and I don't like him. Now, most of the Blue Bloods do cheat. That's just a fact in college basketball. Because there's only 5 guys on the court at one time, if you can buy an elite player, he's going to make a difference to your program, right? One great player can make you a great team. There's only 5 guys on the court at a time. So these teams, they break rules. If you're not cheating, you're not trying, I guess, in college basketball. And it's unfortunate. But the Billy Preston thing a few years back was what really tipped me off to the fact that Bill Self's going to cheat and he just doesn't care. Billy Preston was a 5-star recruit who got caught driving a car that a booster gave him. And the only reason he got caught was because he got in a car accident. And, you know, the NCAA is such a joke. They should have investigated that, and they could have dropped the hammer on Kansas years ago. But, of course, Kansas is a blue blood, so they let it slide. They never investigated it. And the fact that they're even investigating them now and dropping the NOA on them now is just proof that the program is cheated so much, so often, that even the NCAA, who's given Kansas a pass for years because they're one of the elite blue bloods in the sport, even the NCAA can't turn a blind eye to it anymore because the FBI had so much wiretap dirt on Bill Self that they finally had to step in and do something. That being said, I wouldn't expect the NCAA to send a postseason ban KU's way until next season. I think Kansas will be fine this year. It's possible Bill Self could get a small suspension this year. That won't hurt their chances to win a natty this year. So I think Kansas will be eligible to win a national championship. I just don't like the fact they have this hanging over them. So I dropped them a couple spots. Based on the way they played yesterday, though, I'll probably drop them a couple more spots. 28, 29 turnovers is just awful. I don't care who you're playing. I don't care how good a defender Trey Jones is. And I don't care if it's your first game of the season. That just was not a good look for Kansas. And so at one point in the offseason, I clearly thought KU was going to be the number 1 team, but I don't think that anymore. They'll still be in my top 10, obviously, somewhere, but they're going to be moving down a little bit. Number 2, I had Michigan State. And number 1, I had Kentucky. And no, I'm not changing it based off yesterday. This is where I had these teams in my preseason. I just did not get a chance to do detailed videos on all of my teams. I did have Kentucky number 1 in the preseason. I did have Michigan State number 2. Now, if Josh Langford were healthy, I would have had Michigan State number 1. And I realized he didn't play for them last year in the NCAA tournament, and they still made the Final Four. But regardless of that, he's still an important piece, and he still would make Michigan State a lot better. So not having Langford hurts Michigan State. And another thing about Michigan State making the Final Four last year, everybody's so high on Michigan State, and Michigan State was the consensus number 1 team coming into the season because they made the Final Four last year, and they have their point guard, all-world point guard Cassius Winston coming back. Okay, great. Well, Kentucky was an overtime period away from making the Final Four, and they have their point guard coming back, Ashton Higgins. They have a lot of their key pieces coming back, and they have a much better recruiting class coming in than Michigan State. So Michigan State made the Final Four. Kentucky made the Elite Eight. But Kentucky went to overtime with Auburn in that Elite Eight game. Like I said, they were an overtime period away from making the Final Four as well. And Michigan State's recruiting class is the ceiling is so much higher for those guys than what Michigan State has coming in. And I'm not saying I don't like guys like Rocket Watts. I think he can be a key contributor. But Tyrese Maxey, there's just no comparison. Tyrese Maxey is a game changer, one and done type, and he proved that in the game yesterday. I was high on Maxey even before yesterday, and his potential is what vaulted Kentucky over Michigan State, in my opinion, even before the game yesterday. And I think guys like Nick Richards and E.J. Montgomery are going to make big jumps this year. You have Emmanuel Quigley. You have Ashton Hagans at the point returning. He was the starting point guard all year last year. And he was good enough to get Quade Green to leave town and transfer to Washington. And Quade Green was a 5-star recruit as well. So that tells you how good Ashton Hagans is. He's a lot like Trey Jones. He's a disruptive, on-the-ball witch of a defender. And if he can improve his three-point shot and improve his judgment on the offensive end a little bit, which you would think he would do moving from a freshman to a sophomore this year, I just think Kentucky's upside is higher than Michigan State's. And if Cal gets the most out of this team, their upside's a lot higher than Michigan State's. And I've thought that for months. I've thought that since May and June and whatever. So I just think everybody's, and it's not to say that I'm not calling anybody stupid for having Michigan State number one. They are the consensus number one. And I have them number two. I had them number two in the preseason. So it's not like I don't think Michigan State's capable of winning the championship. But it's one of those things where they're the least convincing AP and coaches, preseason number one that I've ever seen. The least convincing to me. And as I had stated earlier, I wouldn't be surprised at all if Maryland wins the Big Ten. And I love point guards, and I love Cassius Winston. I think losing Nick Ward and losing Kenny Goins in the front court hurts them. I'm high on Xavier Tillman. I do think he's a stud. But he hasn't proven he's like an elite level, all Big Ten, all American type, power forward in the front court. He may turn out to be that, but he's not that yet. And so I think the losses hurt. And losing Matt McQuaid, also, a guy who would hit some timely three-pointers for you, a good defender. He usually guarded the best team's player in the backcourt. So those are bigger losses than people are talking about. And this Michigan State team is very young. Outside of Winston and Langford, the team is very young, and Langford may not even suit up this year. So that's another thing. So let me hit that point on Michigan State. So I'll leave it at this for Michigan State. If Langford comes back 100% in February or March, if he's 100% by the NCAA tournament, then yes, Michigan State can absolutely cut down the nets in Atlanta and win the whole thing. But if he doesn't play, and Izzo's already said he's not playing until January at the earliest, so that's a horrible sign, then I can easily fade Michigan State here on the futures. As the betting favorite in Vegas, the highest I've seen anywhere is 8-1. And that's only one place that has 8-1 at Circa. Most places have them between 5-1 and 3-1. There's absolutely no value on hitting Michigan State on the future line. I'm happy to fade them. I think they're a great team, but when you're trying to make money betting futures, you're always going to find value on teams that aren't the consensus pick to win the title. You're never going to get value on the Blue Bloods. So let's go ahead and talk about this for a second, since that's a big part of what I'm about and what the channel's about. Let's talk about the futures. You're never going to get value on Kentucky or Michigan State or Duke or Kansas or even Villanova nowadays, or Gonzaga. The blue bloods in the sport are never going to give you the value. So if you're willing to, take these risks and try to make money, what you do is you find the teams that are just outside that group. You take the Ohio States at 60-1 and the, whoever, the LSU's at 80-1, or who do I have on my list? The Utah State's at 250-1, like I was talking about in my last video. I have Utah State at number 17. You hope to make a deep run with one of those teams, and then you hedge them if they make the Final Four or make the title game. How I had Texas Tech last year at 80-1. They make the title game, and then you hedge that, and you still make a lot of money. You still make a nice profit for the season. I didn't have futures on Virginia last year because they were never higher than like 20-1, yet I still made money. 3 years ago, I didn't have a North Carolina future when they won the title, but I had an 80-1 future on Gonzaga, and I was able to hedge beautifully in that game, especially on in play, because there were times in that game when Gonzaga was favored on the in play, because I think Gonzaga had like a 4-point lead with like 3 minutes left. So I was able to make some great profitable hedges on that. You're never going to get value on these top 5 teams. I did get a lot of value on Florida because I bet it before they got Kerry Blackshear. But now that they have Blackshear, I think the highest you're going to find on Florida is maybe 16-1 or 18-1, which is probably still some good value. I think Circa had 18-1 on Florida. I think that's a play. If you're anywhere near downtown Las Vegas, you should stop in at Circa and maybe grab that Florida at 18-1. So anyway, we're going to get value from the teams that are in the number 9 to number 25 range. The teams that are usually in the top 8, top 7, it's very hard to get any value. You have to be willing to fade them. And Michigan State is a team that I'm just not worried about fading. I'm not worried about fading Duke. I usually am every year. I certainly was last year with the 3-headed monster of Zion, RJ Barrett, and Cam Reddish they had last year. Fortunately for me, they didn't make the Final Four. But this year, I'm not too worried about it. If they make it, they make it. They're not a team that scares me. Their offense just doesn't look that fluid. And same thing with Michigan State. If they make it, they make it, but I'm willing to fade them, especially without Josh Langford in the lineup. Just a couple of other things I want to touch on before I close this video, because I'm always giving updates and certainly future line updates. But if you've watched the previous videos, you saw that I had Utah State at number 17, and I talked a lot about how I thought they were one of the best values in town at 200-1. I think one place had 250-1. Everyone else had them like 60-1 or 80-1. So if you could have got that 200-1 or higher on the Aggies, I thought it was a great value. Let me give a Utah State update. I still like the number. I'm a little concerned about Utah State. When I put them in my preseason poll at number 17, I was assuming that Neemias Queta was going to be 100% healthy at some point in the season. I think this Utah State team with a healthy Queta is a Final Four dark horse contender. I think they're that good. I think that's the ceiling. Elite 8 dark horse, Final Four dark horse. I think they can be this year what everybody thought Nevada out of the Mountain West was going to be last year. Nevada was a top 5 preseason team last year. So that's what they can be. However, I'm a little worried about him. I had heard him, he was asked about his knee injury. He got, again, if you don't know, he sustained a knee injury over the summer playing in the under-19 World Games for his home, Portugal. And they've kind of been tight-lipped about how serious the injury is. They said he didn't do any damage to his ACL. They said he sprained the knee, but he hurt his kneecap was actually damaged. But they said that he should be okay, and you know, they were being tight-lipped about it, but the word was he was going to be fine. And he was even asked about it in an interview, and he said, it's no big deal, it's not serious, I'll be fine. So I took that as, it's not a big deal, it's not serious, he'll be fine. And I've been playing Utah State futures like crazy because I love the team with him being part of it. Well, he did not play in their first game against Montana State. And Craig Smith issued a statement saying there's no timetable for his return. And I've been doing this long enough to know that that statement is a bad sign. Now, it's not to say he couldn't play the very next game. There's times when coaches have said no timetable for a return, and the guy comes back and plays in a week or 2 weeks or a month or whatever. It's usually a bad sign, though. It's usually a bad sign, and it's not a very confident statement. So we'll have to keep our eye on him. I'm going to drop Utah State from number 17. I'll probably drop them to like number 24, number 25, somewhere in that ranking. I still think they're a good team. They're still my favorite in the Mountain West. But until I see Queta on the court 100%, and then I'll raise him back higher, I'm just not as high on this team. Their ceiling is nowhere near what it can be with him on the court. So I will drop him. and a few spots in my rankings. As far as taking the 200 to 1 or the 250 to 1 on Utah State, I still think it's a good gamble because you're getting such crazy juicy odds. You're gambling that he makes it back and makes it back healthy. And if he does, then you have a great value future bet to have all season long in college basketball. And the main thing for me is, as long as he gets back by January, if he's 100% by January, conference play in the Mountain West, then you're fine. You have a great bet. So I just wanted to give an update on that. I am a little concerned with his injury. Also, Harvard. Let's do a Harvard update. I had them at number 24 in my preseason poll. Go back and watch that video. I did a whole 30-minute video just on Harvard. I really broke them down for you. And I said I love them on the future line at 400 to 1. They played yesterday as well. Now, granted, they played a Division III opponent, MIT. They play MIT every year. And the past 2 seasons, they've struggled in their opening game with MIT. The MIT had really given them a great game the last 2 years. Well, what happened yesterday? Harvard tied the school record for margin of victory. They beat MIT 84 to 27. So I think, and I know it's just MIT. I know it's a D3 team. I'm not, popping champagne corks and getting all excited about having them ranked when just about 98% of the so-called experts out there don't even have Harvard ranked. But they look good. And they look good considering their point guard, Bryce Aiken, didn't even play. He's the Ivy League Player of the Year from last year, but he's day-to-day. It looks like he's going to be fine. He doesn't have a serious injury. And then the Ivy League Player of the Year from the year before that, Seth Towns, who is still part of the team, he didn't play as well. So Harvard didn't have arguably their 2 best players and still tied the school record for margin of victory against MIT yesterday. So even though it's just an exhibition game, it's a good look for Harvard. The one bad thing, though, is like Neemias Keita at Utah State, I'm concerned about Seth Towns. I thought he was going to be 100% and healthy. He injured his knee before last season and missed the whole year last year. So I thought he would come back and be healthy this year. Like Keita, there's no timetable for his return. And what's even worse is that the medical staff has not cleared him for all contact-related activities. So that's a bad sign for Seth Towns. So let's hope for him to have a speedy recovery, because even though Harvard is super deep, and they're going to be good with or without Seth Towns, a healthy Seth Towns just makes him that much better. And now you would have the Ivy Player of the Year from 2 years ago and the Ivy Player of the Year from last year playing together on the same team. So here's wishing you a speedy recovery, Seth Towns. And I just want to give that update as well. Not too much else to take away from yesterday. It was only day 1 of the college basketball season. I'm just happy as hell that it's here and that we're into the season. Thanks for watching the video, and I will continue to give future updates and try to help y'all make some more money out there. I will do another top 25 rankings after the weekend's games conclude. So I'm going to do some college football videos next after Saturday's games, and then I'll hit a college basketball video probably around Tuesday or Wednesday of next week. So again, thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you soon.